Hey everyone, welcome to the Where the Hell Do We Go From Here podcast, where we try to figure out faith, identity, and life one existential crisis at a time. My name is Kevin, and today we're going to be talking about, do I still believe in God? And to have this conversation, I asked my best friend and fellow ex-evangelical Christian to come join me. So, Jonathan, do you want to just give a brief introduction of who you are, what you believed before, where you're at now, just a little two-minute testimony of your story?
Okay, buzzword. No, you got me though, because whenever you said, wait, where the hell do we go from here? I genuinely thought like something messed up with the recording, and I was like, wait, what? No. Well, hello, I'm Jonathan. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so I can like literally jump right into it. My father was a Southern Baptist pastor, and grew up in the church, grew up with the PK mindset, pastor's kid, preacher's kid. And that experience, thought I was a Christian when I was young, got baptized when I was 7, had some questions whenever I got to puberty age and realized that, men are kind of hot. Um, Thought I was bisexual, and then as time went on, realized that my attraction to women was quickly diminishing, or actually it was proving to be not as deep as I thought it was. And yeah, came out really forced out of the closet when I was like 14, and it was a whole debacle with my parents, and I at the time didn't have sense of self. It was very dependent on who I was around, who cared for me, my caretakers, and so ended up suppressing a lot of myself and a lot of the discovery that was to come, but it came. So um yeah, from like 14 to 18, was very confused about life, and was at a private evangelical school, so I was learning things about theology and ethics and everything, and thought that potentially God existed, but if God existed, God was probably not a fan of who I was or what I was doing or what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
I had a very protected childhood, and as a person, I can be kind of like, let's go do things. But
Yeah.
when it comes to making bigger decisions, I'm a lot more hesitant. I want to like weigh out all the pros and cons, try to figure out what I'm doing. So I was very like slow to act on a lot of what I then called my same-sex attractions. And so, yeah, then had a born again experience after getting evangelized when I was 18 during COVID. Super fun. Got involved in a super, these are buzzwords, reformed. I don't know if I should explain. Should I
Yeah,
not?
yeah, maybe just give like a little description, but probably some people will be familiar with the terms.
Yeah. So reformed, just meaning that they were Calvinist in their soteriology, just their doctrine of salvation, and charismatic in the way that they express their worship to God. So it's a weird mixture. You don't normally find those things together. It was a very like reformed, strict, like this is the way, the Bible's 100% true. There are no errors, there are no contradictions. You are evil. And if you are unable to understand the Bible in its 100% accuracy and perfection, you're the problem, not God. You're wanting to sin, you're wanting to subvert what God has made perfect in some way, and it's on you. But at the same time, very charismatic. So they were all about expressing yourself emotionally, not suppressing your emotions
Mm,
when oriented toward God.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, the ones that were uh, not necessarily against God, but the ones that caused you to question and to feel maybe you didn't know, those were, kind of off limits. Um, but yeah, I was in that church for 3 years. And then I started, we can get into this further, but as I started like really questioning some things in seminary, um, I started my biblical and theological studies track at seminary, ended up doing a master's and bachelor's program together, was 2.5 years in, was heading toward the finish line, just wanted to graduate. And then I had a meltdown, realizing that a lot of the things I was studying, I didn't see as fitting together. And I realized that in order to fit these things together, I had to deny my sense of reality and truth. And that sounds really, I don't know, it sounds almost poetic or whatever, but it's actually like heart-wrenching and gut-wrenching to realize that in order to continue with people that you love in a community that you love, you have to deny everything you know to be true.
Yeah.
And I'm like looking at you. You have whether or not denying what you feel intuitively, what you believe, what you see as factually true, is that worth denying for the sake of comfort, stability, for whatever? And so, yeah, that honestly, that prompted a wild deconstruction journey. It's a buzzword as well. But yeah, I'm like, deconstruction just refers to the dismantling of ideas and beliefs that you held, and to make room for where truth is potentially leading you. Which deconstruction and reconstruction, a lot of Christians I've talked to, they're big on the reconstruction part because they want to get you back into the box as easily and as quickly as possible. But if you don't deconstruct things, you can't reconstruct because you don't have a foundation to build off of.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell. So thanks for listening to my TED Talk.
Yeah, I don't know if have you heard of, like, from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? They have this, this kind of metaphor that they use, like the shelf. Have you ever heard of the metaphor, like, my shelf broke?
No.
So it's like, I mean, I don't know if other other communities use it, but I know that at least in the Mormon community, especially like in the people who deconstruct from Mormonism, they have this saying that's like, whenever they don't understand something, or whenever something is like a contradiction or something that doesn't make sense, it's like, put it on the shelf. And like, sometimes you don't understand things, you just gotta have faith. So if you don't understand something, like, just put it on the shelf. And then there comes a point where you put so much stuff on the shelf that like your shelf breaks. And that's a kind of metaphor that they use. They're like, yep, after a point, my shelf broke and I just couldn't do it anymore. Like, I couldn't, just the evidence against Christianity, or the evidence against at least our particular understanding of Christianity, just broke. And once you get to that point, there's no way to really salvage that without giving up, without just, I don't even know. I don't know if giving up a part of yourself is a good way to say it, but just sort of becoming a shell of yourself, really. And it's crazy. And it's funny because Jonathan and I, we met when we were both very, very strong evangelical Christians. So we have both seen each other at like the point where, like I've seen Jonathan like in his church and like in his environment and in his Reformed community, and he's seen mine in my community, and he's seen me in my community, and we sort of went through like the deconstruction process together, and we're figuring stuff out together. So yeah, it's been a wild ride, because I don't think us of 3 years ago would have believed that we are, or even 2 years ago would have believed that we are here right now.
Yeah.
Like,
well, yeah, I remember there was a moment where a friend of mine picked me up from the airport. This was back in, I guess, November of 2023, pretty sure. And I was not doing well. Like, I was not in a good space mentally. And I'd come back from a trip, I think it was to visit my family. And I had this moment of like, almost, it wasn't quite clarity, but it was getting there.
yeah.
And I told my friend, I really don't want to leave my church. And I hadn't said anything about leaving my church. And yet that, like, I remember she remembers that moment as being like super intense for her because she knows how involved I was, how much I loved my church. I would talk shit about other churches, not really, but and like try to elevate my church and be like, not because we're like superior than you, but because like I thought we
Not
actually,
because we're superior than you.
yeah, no,
In
literally,
quotation marks, but yes, keep going.
you leave, and then it's we are superior than you, but no, because the people that were in it, they really did envelop me with this kind of like love and like understanding. And I even had one guy from my church a few years back when we were going to school together. He specifically asked to meet with me to discuss homosexuality, and no like biblically what does this mean, whatever, just to like talk about it, because he was uber straight. Like, actually, I don't think he was like a down on the down low straight guy who actually like wants to, I think like genuinely he told me like, I don't understand this and my temptation is to be homophobic. And I would rather talk to someone who genuinely understands it and gets it than just keep being hateful. And I was like, that to me was like so impressive as a, like as a human, that you are willing to hold these beliefs, that the beliefs themselves will, if you let them, enhance your own innate homophobia, like due to
Absolutely.
your, yeah, it's like, it's not as if these beliefs, you know, what you believe, how, I'm trying to find like the best way to put it. Like, sometimes beliefs are not neutral in themselves, but they can be neutral in the way that you use them. Like, either you can use them for really good or for really bad.
Mm.
And I more often than not, the teaching that homosexuality is dirty, barren, defiled, quote unquote, from one of my professors at Boyce. Um, yeah, I'm like, I just stood in there. I'm like, I don't know, should I name drop? I don't know.
It does. Yeah, I don't think it's a big deal.
No, not. And he knows that everyone thinks he's kind of an asshole, so it doesn't really matter. He'll get what's coming to him. um, but yeah, like those beliefs themselves, I think, lend themselves to being acted on with hatred.
Yeah.
And so I think for someone to then take them and try to love people well, even with those beliefs, at the time that was like really meaningful to me, for sure. But I have a question for you, Mr. Hoster.
Mm.
Uh, what was your shelf moment?
What was my shelf moment? Oh my god. My
Yeah,
shelf.
gradual decline, and then it was like,
No, literally, my shelf moment. And I can talk like more in detail about this. Probably like I'll probably talk more in detail about this in another episode. But in like a nutshell, it was learning a lot about the history of the Bible, learning about different contradictions, different kinds of issues with the Bible, and trying very hard to reconcile them over the course of many years. And everything from just our scientific understanding of the world and how that differs from the accounts of the Bible, or how some of the Genesis accounts do not seem to actually, there's no evidence of them occurring, and there's actually evidence against them even being able to occur. And yeah, the discrepancies in the Gospels, a lot of things. I think a lot of things was with the Bible itself, with the source material, and just not feeling like it was trustworthy or reliable. And then there came a point where eventually I just found myself not being able to believe it, not because I didn't want to, like I wanted to, like I was, and we've talked about this. There's people that are like, oh, you just want to leave Christianity because you're following your emotions, or because you are, I don't know, like you just want to sin or whatever. But like for me, that was not the case. If I were to have followed my emotions, I would have stayed a Christian because I didn't want to go. And like I I had like such a strong, like this was my everything. Like Jesus was my everything. My, like I lost all my community, I lost all my friends, I lost like, or like most of my friends, I lost like so many things, and I didn't want to leave. And it wasn't until getting to the point where around November of 2023, I just found myself incapable of like believing these things. Like um sort of going against my intellectual honesty was such a big issue for me that I got to the point where I was like, I can no, like, I genuinely can no longer follow this and believe this, knowing the harm that it's causing other people and the harm that it's causing myself if I don't believe that it's true. And I was like, okay, well, I should probably like end my life now before I become an apostate and before I leave the faith. And because I knew that there was no way that I could keep going like that. And it got to the point of me considering like ending my life. And I took 2 weeks to like seriously consider that because it's what made most sense. I was like, okay, well, I'd rather die now before I become an apostate and like walk away from Jesus and potentially like go to hell, whatever you believe in, like once saved, always saved or not. Like, and I struggled with it for 2 weeks and I said, this is not a sustainable way to keep living. If I want to make it to the new year, I need to be willing to engage with my doubts and my questions in a way that doesn't force me to get to a certain conclusion. And that's what I did. And that's when my shelf broke. And right now, I think over the last year or so, I've gone back and forth as to whether I believe in God or whether I don't believe in God. And I would consider myself like more of like an agnostic atheist at this point. I'd say that, like I'm open, like I'm open to believing that there's something out there, even if it's not what we stereotypically understand as God. Like I'm open to different ideas. However, there's not any kind of like deity or there's not any kind of religion that I adhere to or that I see as containing like the objective truth. I think more than anything, I would classify my atheism not like in like being against God, but just having like a lack of belief in any specific God. So I would say it's more of like non-resistant non-believer. So I am a non-believer, not because I like hate God or because I'm angry at God, but just because I haven't found anything that's convincing enough to warrant that faith. Yeah, that's where I am. No. And I guess pivoting that to you, how have you like navigated like leaving Christianity? Where are you now when it comes to what you believe about God? Like, do you believe that there is a God? Do you believe that there isn't? Like, what do you believe or not believe?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's levels and layers and all the things because I feel like with some of the beliefs, I know particularly you and I were enculturated with and held, hell was a huge fear tactic to keep us within the confines of what is good and right and true per the people in power over us. Um, Not even just hell, but also like demonic spirits and these things that will get you if you believe differently. And like there's verses that talk about like, in the last days they will be, following their itching ears by hearing doctrines that sound good to them. And it's like it's this huge fear around leaving what is again accepted in that community. And I think once I began to like deconstruct, like, okay, hell is not a clear concept. Hell, there's no sense of hell in the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, everyone goes to the same place, and it doesn't seem like this great place to be, but it doesn't seem like this place of like punishment or some kind of like torment that's going to happen to me. And then like contrasting, just like then you hear in the New Testament times when God is very clear that He loves everyone and wants to rescue all flesh and redeem all flesh, and then you just like try to hold it all together. And so that led to me kind of deconstructing hell as a concept. Like, okay, maybe we've tried to fit things into categories of like, okay, well, if someone is awful on this planet, surely they will get it back whenever they die. And it's in some ways it's almost like fitting our human emotions into theology, which I think it's the tradition personally. Like I think that's how we interact with God and faith. I think it's a good thing, but I think taking it as like objective fact,
Yeah.
that's where you lose the plot. Um, Same thing with demonic spirits. Like I don't see these, like I don't see much reason to believe in demons and whatever things that, from what I've read and studied, it seems like were kind of created in the period between the end of Malachi and Matthew.
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and so, yeah, I think it's really interesting. That has led me to be more open to other faith systems, other ways of experiencing spirituality. And I think right now, like, I think agnostic is probably where I would land. I don't necessarily know if atheist will ever feel right for me, even though I think functionally.
Mm.
Uh, I don't actually know. I'm like, even saying that out loud, I'm like, I think functionally I can be a theist at times. I just think it's more of that kind of, I don't know. But there's a lot of shit here that I don't understand, and I don't want to miss out on something, but at the same time, I'm not gonna believe in something just because I'm scared of hell. That's not a positive enough belief to sustain me through doubt and also giving
Mm.
up my life. If I'm gonna put my hope in something, it's not in the negative of, you could die and you could be tormented forever by a God who loves you so, so much. Um, I'm like, cool, then he doesn't. Like, I don't. It's an oxymoron at that point in my head. I don't know personally, but yeah, I think now I'm at a spot where I'm learning that like trusting my body and my intuition is like really important in this time. Like I have a lot of really I feel empathy very deeply with people. I feel my connection with others very deeply. I feel very connected to nature when I'm in nature. I feel like um, when I'm more in tune with who I feel myself to be as a human here, right now, breathing, talking to you, I'm more able to like just connect with that spiritual side of myself.
Mm.
And whether that's self worship, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't think so.
Yeah. And
But yeah,
no,
go
it's
ahead.
interesting because even that last part where you mentioned like it being like whether it's like self worship and towards the beginning of when you were talking mentioning how in like Revelation it talks about how people are gonna wander away and like follow their like itching ears and like whatever, or I don't know if it's Revelation that says that specific part, but I whatever, one of the books of the New Testament is like, yeah, they're gonna follow their itching ears and they are God is gonna send like a delusion or whatever, like whatever it may be. Um, and it's very interesting because like sort of as you're talking and even as I'm talking, I hear a lot of like the really big like apologetic points like come up in my head, like ways like defend this and like ways to say like no, but this is like this and that and blah, 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 and it like my brain is still programmed to like use these biblical arguments like theodicies to explain these things. And at the end of the day, have to, I realized that and there's something that I had to realize during my deconstruction that I would be more willing to do some kind of special pleading and go through greater lengths to explain and to reconcile things in the Bible than I would for things in the Quran or things in the Book of Mormon or things in some other kind of holy text. And I felt that I was being biased because I think that if we were to take, and this is what people do from all religions, if I were to be Muslim or if I was a Mormon or if I was a Hindu, um, I could find ways to explain things and like argue things based on my perspective and based on my worldview. And as you said, like it's just not convincing enough because it's something that everyone can do in a different degree.
Mhm.
But Yeah, and when you mention like self-worship, it's very interesting because again, I think that's a remnant of how we were wired to think. Like we were wired to think that anything that comes from us is evil and yeah, like putting like making ourselves an idol or going against God or putting ourselves above God. And I think that kind of mentality also can keep people stuck. And can keep like even reinforce like people leaving the faith can make people's faith in the church be reinforced because they're like, yeah, see, these prophetic things are happening. People are leaving the church. People are following what they want to hear. Um, and in a way, it's like confirmation bias, and in a way, it's just solidify what they already want to believe. And the truth is, most religions or many belief systems have similar arguments, which is yeah, like I was like, I don't want to leave Christianity because I don't want to be one of those people who just follows my itching ears or just follows like what I want to hear. And I realized that's a very effective manipulative tactic to keep people afraid of questioning and of trusting their own, yeah, their own mind and their own doubts and when things don't make sense. It is a very powerful control tactic, I would say.
Speaking of control, my last church, well, not my last church, but the church that I was in that I deconstructed out of, um, I went to one of my pastors who was a mentor, someone that I loved and still love deeply. I remember sitting over Panera with him and talking about what I was thinking through and like the questions of like, okay, so like Isaiah 45:7 says that like God created light and darkness. He does good and he does evil. He creates evil. Actually, the verb there in Hebrew is like to literally create evil. And yet, when you go to like First John, you read that in God there is no darkness in him. And so it's like, okay, so like how can God create things that are not of him? How can God create things that don't exist within him if he's the being out of which all is? And then not even just that, if you hold to the catechism that my church held to, then you're committed to believing that God cannot create evil. And yet when you read your Bible without any blinders, God is the creator of evil. So it's just like, how do you deal with that? And then not even just that, there's, like you mentioned earlier, the contradictions that I came across. I mean, just take the advice of Bart Ehrman, Pass Through Me. Like, sit down, read all of the resurrection accounts, see if you can create any linear story of what happened. Like, who did Jesus talk to? Where did he talk to them? The angel, or how many angels said what to whom? Like, what? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, was it the men who carried on this tradition, or was it the women? Like, what are? And so I presented all of this, not all of it,
Yeah.
detail, but I presented these issues to my pastor at the time, one of my pastors, and his response was, Jonathan, you're thinking emotionally. And
Point.
I genuinely at the time remember it not sitting well with me. But as I do remember in that moment too thinking, I'm gonna have to leave this church. Like that was like one of the first moments that I was like honest with myself. Like this is not a safe place for me. And when I thought back more on it, I was like, this is one of the most manipulative tactics I've ever experienced to,
As
as if emotions don't matter. But anyway, to delegitimize someone's real concerns with what literally governs their entire life, faith, and practice. I mean, it's no secret. I'm gay. I gave up my sexuality. I was celibate. I was in school. I completely uprooted my entire life, purpose, identity, everything for this belief, and for it to be potentially built upon things that weren't accurate. And you're going to call me emotional? Like now I'm getting fucking emotional because that's you're like that in some ways that more manipulative because they're triggering an emotional response out of you to confirm what they're saying, which is wild. It's
Oh my
lit
God, that is so
wild.
God. That is
You can spend
so
moment that you're emotional in response to the fact that they just, made a libelous claim against you. Boom, you're proving their point right. You are unstable. You are, thinking with your heart instead of your deceitful heart than,
yeah.
listening to wisdom.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But then if you use that same mind, those same emotions, and that same logic, and it's something that aligns with what they want you to believe, then it's like God given, and it's like you're being led by the Holy Spirit, and that
Mhm.
is, and what bothers me so much is that it's covered in this like glaze of like love and like harmony, and like we just want you to experience like the Father's love and just live in accordance like imago Dei, like what like the image that God made you to live in and exist in. And it's like, how can someone that loves me this much and like be this like manipulative and be this controlling and be this like do such like evil things? And I think genuinely like most of these people aren't people that have necessarily malicious intentions. I just think they are indoctrinated. They have a very emotional attachment to what they believe, and they genuinely believe they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And but that is crazy, and that is wild, and that's what bothers me so much when people are like, "Yeah, but Christianity is just about spreading love." No, the fuck, it's not. It's not just about spreading love. It's about spreading an ideology that is supposed to like based in love, but the ideas themselves are one oftentimes incorrect, and two cause so much damage and hurt, but it's hard to identify because it's covered in so much love and so much grace, and it's or
Mhm.
love and grace. And it really it's such a it's like the epitome of like gaslighting, and like it's the epitome of like like abusive relationship.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that I am more hesitant to religion in general and like spirituality in general. Um, and I guess like going like sort of going back to like what we were talking about and like getting our final thoughts in, like, um, I think I don't know if you would agree, but I think you are more open to like spirituality as like a general sense and a general idea than I am. I think like I'm more on the we had this conversation before. I don't think I'm like what is a materialist? Like I don't think
Mm.
I'm like that, but I think that I am much. I'm very skeptical about anything like supernatural,
Mhm.
like new age or anything more, anything other than like what I can like physically like observe and test and
Yeah.
measure than you are. And not that that's like wrong or anything. I think that's just it's very interesting to see like how we like the place that we have both like gravitated towards. And I guess I just want to hear a bit more of like where you just like what that experience is for you and like practicing spirituality outside of like religious dogma.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and that's where like I think there can be, like you said, I think it's true that I probably am a bit more open to like spirituality or some kind of, you know, whatever outside of just material. But at the same time, I don't think you're completely closed off. I think that you will listen and you'll weigh, you'll test, you'll do things. I think that's healthy. Um, I think specifically after leaving the kind of communities that we were in, there are two extremes you can go to. One, you can completely shut off all sense of anything outside of just like, nope, this is what I experience and this is what I see, and if I don't see it, it's not real. And I think that
Right.
can get warped really easily. Um, and at the same time, people who are in high control religious settings, the other extreme of like, well, I'm going to find another path to completely get enmeshed in and like lose my individuality again. And I think that's where I'm trying really hard not to straddle each line, or sorry, trying to straddle both while also like remaining healthy. Um, I
It's all
think for
about
me, like,
strategy.
it's all about straddling. If we're not straddling, you're not doing it right. Um, and yeah, I think it is something that, like, if you've never allowed yourself to explore other paths or spiritual means or whatever, and especially if you've deconstructed, like, no, I don't think hell exists, I don't think, like, demonic, that whatever, yeah, like, I think it's good and healthy to, like, see other practices. So for me recently, like, I find zodiac interesting. I'm like, I never allowed myself to believe in this before because it couldn't be true. Or if it was true, it's because of God. And it's because, I've chatted. I love my mother. She's fantastic and she's a wonderful human. She's a deep, deep Christian. And I remember, like, broaching the idea of zodiac to her recently. And she was like, well, I mean, it kind of makes sense that if God created everything and we're made of water and the moon controls the tides, that we would change depending on where the moon is. And I was like, it's like, my mom's a zodiac syncretist? What the hell? Like, what is happening? Going, um, but, like, I think, like, trying to read your daily horoscope, I think, is bullshit personally. But at the same time, like, looking at where you are and, like, where you were born, what time you were born, where the planets were, and, like, my thing is, like, Christians instilled in me, look at the fruit of something. If the fruit of something is good, potentially it may be a helpful thing. If it's not good, if it's bearing bad fruit, leave it. Don't eat it, like. And so I think for me, like, I try to think of it that way of, like, okay, like, if my Mercury is in Libra and that means that I supposedly see both sides of every argument, and I'm a pretty reasonable debater, and I do tend to see both sides of every argument, maybe there's something interesting there. So yeah, zodiac is something that's, like, I don't think it's Bible necessarily, but it's one of those things. My dad always says, eat a fish, spit out the bones.
Mhm.
I don't know. I've been trying to approach it that way, and then also tarot cards. Like, I have had friends that I've told that I've pulled some tarot cards recently, and their eyes get large, their mouth drops agape. It's kind of like, oh, you are,
Board.
like, huh?
You're using a Ouija board.
No, yeah, no, literally. Um, and it's like, this is something that, like, with astrology, like, the magi who came and visited Jesus
Yeah.
most likely were astrologers.
Yeah.
Uh, there's a very common thing, like, from what I've read, it seems like this has been going on for a long, long time, and that Christians throughout history don't like the fusion of this star shit with God shit. And I think that's actually the whole point, is, like, maybe all of this is very connected with nature and all the things. But yeah, even with tarot, like, I think tarot is more about trying to get in touch with your intuition more than it is someone telling you something. Like, maybe there's real spirit guides who tell you shit. I don't know. I don't really care. Half the time, though, when I pull tarot and it tells me something that I already know but might need to hear, that's
Mm,
good. Going to push me toward growth and progress.
yeah.
And if anything pushes me toward growth and progress, I'm probably going to listen to it at least a bit.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think, again, it makes sense that, like, if you are, like, I think I am in some ways more spiritually minded, and my sister has dreams. She's also a deep Christian. She has dreams. I've had a dream or two recently that has come true, or that I've interacted with in a weird, prophetic kind of way. I don't know. I don't know. I think all shit's connected, and I think there's so much beauty in this is where I'm at. I think the beauty is in the freedom and liberty you give yourself
Yep.
to explore. And, not every dart you throw at the wall is going to stick, but also some of them are pointy, and maybe throw them because they might actually help you. I don't know.
Uh, yeah. Well, if you didn't catch that, we had a bit of, like, technical difficulties, but I think we're back now. But yeah, no, I was saying that after leaving high control religion, after being told that if you stray from this path in any way, you are going to go to hell, or there's such consequence and fear of exploring outside of it. I think leaving it and giving yourself the permission to explore freely and see what do you actually believe, what what is truth, just like it's giving yourself the permission to explore is probably the biggest thing that I think one can do after being in high control religion or a high control belief system. And yeah, I mean, there are things that I've seen and things that I've heard that I can't explain. Like, I don't have I'm not denying that there are things that are outside of our current understanding. And I think because of that, there's things that I'm open to spirituality. I'm open to like these things being true. But I don't believe that, at least in my experience, in my case, specifically Christianity is the truth. And I think giving yourself the permission to explore without experiencing the fear of, oh, if I get it wrong, I'm going to suffer eternal conscious torment for time and all eternity, you know? And that's no like small thing.
No, but that's just what we deserve because we're so bad, bro.
Yeah, like we're born children of wrath. Like, oh my God.
Yeah, well, I mean, even that, I mean, just thinking about it now, we have one of the main stories that we're taught as children in the church of Adam and Eve reinforces the idea that curiosity and exploration leads you to death.
Yeah.
And I think that does a number on our humanity and does a number on what we naturally are inclined to do. Like if you're teaching people to ask questions to you because they can give, obviously, like, granted, if you have good parents, hopefully you can ask them questions and whatever, but at the same time, to teach them stories that tell them, oh, Eve was curious and wanted to try something. When she did, she killed all of us and threw us all into hell. So don't be like women. I mean, don't ask questions. We love women. They're actually off. Yeah, it's like, I don't. Yeah. So, 100%. That freedom is so important to give yourself. I think it promotes many other areas of growth whenever you just allow yourself to open up.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say to someone who is in the process of like deconstructing or in the process of like doubting their faith and afraid to make the choice to fully walk out, or is wanting to, like, there's still parts of their faith they don't want to let go of, but there's parts that just don't make sense. Like what advice would you give to someone who is currently in the process of deconstructing?
Yeah, that's so honestly, that question for me is one of the harder ones, just because there are things that I would want to say that I know that me a year and 3 months ago, I would not have been receptive to. And so it's kind of, I think where I'm at now with like trying to encourage others who are walking through that is just to be like, when things don't make sense, it's okay. And things probably won't make sense ever. And so if you're starting to unravel things that don't quite jive with what your pastors are saying, or if they don't, if what you're seeing, if what you're feeling is not lining up with, the people who are in power or leadership over you say, then I would keep digging, keep researching, keep empowering yourself, because ultimately we all are just trying our best. And I think that is beautiful. So even though someone may be trying their best and they're in power over you, it doesn't mean they're right against what you think. Mm-hmm. And so I think, just trying to search for truth, keep motivating yourself by recognizing like there are lots of people who are desperately trying to grasp truth and life and reality, and it's a really chaotic, difficult journey, but also the beauty is in that journey as well. Like, there's beauty along the way whenever you're trying to figure out whether or not you should live. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
that is so incredibly difficult. But at the same time, I think if anything, if anyone's like listening to this and feels that, like, you're two queers sitting on a podcast talking about how desperately hopeless we were at one point, feeling like nothing would be the same, that life wouldn't carry on, and we're not doing too bad. I feel like
Yeah.
if any, yeah, I feel like if anything, like the beauty that has come from this, it's worth the messiness of trying to, search through all of the painful, hard topics and make sense of everything. So yeah, I think like truth is worth pain and beauty is worth truth. So like, I don't know, like if you can withstand that pain, like finding what's real and true, I think it yields more beauty than a lie. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So that's honestly, that's all my nuggets of wisdom I think I have for this.
Yeah.
Cool.
Like, if you feel that something doesn't make sense, you probably feel that way for a reason. Like, don't just ignore whenever something doesn't make sense, like, and allow yourself to be gaslit into thinking that you're the one that's wrong. But
Yeah. Well, one person's shelf can only hold so much.
right. Yeah.
And I think the more you put on that shelf, the more books you stack on top, the more doctrines and experiences and abuse, and the more you go, the more you don't realize that that shelf is actually like weighing on you so intensely. And
Mhm.
so while the shelf breaking can feel like you're breaking,
Yeah.
in the way you are, because you know it's the question of, you know oftentimes the things that are on that shelf are the things that have made you who you are because of the way that you were enculturated, the way that you everything. And breaking that shelf, whatever it is breaking you so that you can actually discover what's beyond all the things that have hurt you and made you into that person. It's like that's where the beauty is. Like that's I find, why would you not want that? Like I don't know. I'm like, at the same time, a year and a half ago, I desperately was clinging on to anything that kept me in that church, and yet now I'm like, there's people practically disowning their family in that church. So there's brothers that are not going to their trans sisters. Sorry, brothers that are not going to their family's Christmas because their trans sister's going to be there.
Mm.
That happened in church, and I'm like, and that is viewed as faithfulness and being seen as like, oh, you're being true to what God has convicted you instead of, succumbing to worldliness. Fuck no, you're just being hateful, and all that's doing is pushing your family away. Tangent. I could get into that shit, but
But no,
yeah,
those words are like they just like pierce my heart because it's like, oh my God. Yeah. No, that's so true. Thank you for taking the time to share your experience and have this conversation with me. And I am sure that we'll have plenty more on here. Uh Hopefully it all works out. And hopefully this video actually like comes out fine. But
well,
no,
dude,
but thank you so much for coming on here. Is there any like do you have any final things that you want to say before we close?
I
Yeah.
think our former president said it best, and I'm gonna adapt it for my own usage, but nothing else. After all that, after all the like spiritual, I'm like doses. Yeah, like
We're done here. Oh, like the most straight voice that we can have.
you mean godly.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, thank you all for listening or watching or whatever you're doing. And we will see you next time at Where the Hell Do We Go From Here podcast. So thank you. See you guys.